Well, we have some difficult news to share with you. A tremendous loss for the ABC15 family as we learn that Christopher Sine has passed away. He spent more than a decade with us here in the Valley, and tonight we remember our colleague and our friend.
Hello friends, I'm Christopher Sine. Have a look at your weekend traffic restrictions and alerts.
Christopher Sine wore many hats, and while many of you got to know him as a TV anchor, others knew him as a father, a husband, a University of Alabama football player, a friend.
He was a good man. He was the kind of guy completely devoted to his faith, his country, his family. He was so happy and madly in love with his wife Laura, and I remember the first time that he became a father at ABC15, how thrilled and excited he was, how humbled he was by the responsibility of becoming a dad. As a teammate, Chris didn't have many peers at all. He was a consummate pro. Chris will tell you that he played little football in college, played in the trenches, played O-line, but when we sent Chris out on a story, he was our quarterback, leading the team down the field, always making sure that we got that story right.
Starting in 2005, Chris spent more than a dozen years at ABC15 covering every story you can imagine, from wildfires to the big story of the night or the big game, even breaking news on a national level.
Former President Bill Clinton was in town and met up with U.S. Attorney General Loretta Lynch.
Chris would eventually write a book about that secret tarmac meeting, one of many stories that showcased his talent and professionalism.
You were everything that a journalist should be. Incredibly hardworking, passionate to the point of being obsessed, and competitive as all hell. And we learned so much from you.
He was an excellent journalist. The one thing about Chris is during all that time that I worked with him, he just wasn't a great coworker. He became a friend. He came to my wedding. And the thing that always stood out to me was just how disarming he was. Chris, I have this vision of him always leaning back, almost putting his feet up, and he could make anyone comfortable and have a conversation with anyone almost instantly. He could instantly make you comfortable. I'm not sure that there isn't a person out there he couldn't make a friend. That's what I think of when I think of Chris. And I just don't know really what else to say.
It feels surreal to have to tape this and to have to do this, but Chris was just such an amazing person. From the moment I started working at ABC15, Chris took me under his wing. He was more than just a mentor, though. He was really like a big brother to me the entire time that we worked together.
But beyond his award-winning reporting, Chris had a welcoming way about him. He truly showed you he cared.
He's the kind of a guy who was not just your competitor or your coworker once we worked together, but he was like a family member, a close friend. We were like brothers in contact to recent weeks, where we would text each other things about our family and things about what was happening in our lives. What I want everybody to remember is what a great human being he was. Give you the shirt off of his back, and he would help you do anything. And that's what I hope that we can remember about Christopher Sine.
Chris also wasn't afraid to joke, as former ABC15 News Director Joe Hegemuller says.
There really were two Christophers, and people loved being around both of them. There was the hard news reporter who could go out and get the big story, but there was also the silly and the fun Christopher. And one day I walked into my office and I saw him sitting there in my chair. We had a good laugh about that for years. This photo, it's one of my favorites, and I'll cherish it forever.
He also had some pretty incredible dance moves on full display in one of my favorite photos. That's Chris taking my mother-in-law for a spin around the dance floor at my wedding in 2015. In 2017, he moved back to Alabama to raise his 3 sons with his wife, Laura. Because above all, beyond the bright lights, big headlines, and the next big story, for Chris, his family always came first.
To know Chris was to know that he was such a family man, and everything he did was for them and because of them, and it was so admirable, and there was a lot to admire about Chris.
My thoughts and prayers are tonight with his wife, Laura, and their boys. Chris's death is just absolutely heartbreaking.
And I think so many of us still in shock today. And Craig, I mean, you worked with him for so many years.
13 years, you know, and we were both offensive linemen in college. We both played football, and we had that bond instantly because we had played football, and I coached for many years, as you know, and Chris and I were always ready to talk about sports because he was a huge sports fan.
Oh, yeah.
And this just all took us by shock today. And this is really, really difficult news to digest.
Yeah, and I think anybody who's said anything about him today, it's always gone back to just what an amazing person he was, an amazing husband and father, and just how desperately we will all miss him. And so, Christopher Sine, just 45 years old, you will be so, so missed, my friend. Rest in peace.